It's finally happening after years of being assaulted with big, heavy, expensive, not very eco-friendly electric cars aimed at rich people. We're finally starting to see a shift over to smaller, more affordable models like this thing, the new Hyundai Inster. How cheap? Well, about £23,495,000 for the entry-level version, which might mean around 250 quid a month on PCP. And let's face it, that's not bad by EV standards, by any standards. So we've only got about 4 hours with this car. It's a pre-production prototype, but I will try to tell you what I can in that time. And I want to start with a name, because that's quite interesting. This vehicle is based on a Korean city car called the Casper, a petrol-powered car, no less. They wanted to bring it to the rest of the world in EV form, but they found out that apparently the name Casper was already taken by a friendly ghost, who wasn't very friendly when he found out they were stealing his name. So they decided to steal someone else's name. Design-wise, there's quite a lot going on with this car. I quite like the proportions. It's 3.5 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and about 1.5 meters tall. So it's got kind of crossover vibes going on. Notice also how far forward the wheels are. Very short overhangs front and back, so the wheels are kind of pushed out as far as they'll go, which bodes well for interior space. I like that. It's also quite tall, which bodes well for headroom. I also quite like the fact that you've got these big chunky wheel arches and these 17-inch wheels, which make it look quite, I don't know, stancy. Come back round to the front with me, George, because there's a lot going on here too that I want to point out. So it's not related to Hyundai's Ioniq cars, but it does have some Ioniq DNA with these kind of pixel LED dots for your indicators. Notice also down here we've also got some active aero which open up to let the cooling in to cool the batteries and the motor, or close up to make it more aerodynamically efficient, a bit like on a supercar. That's quite nice. And these big kind of friendly lights. Now, I looked at a picture of another electric car on my phone, and I think what you'll find is that you'll agree with me that they've borrowed inspiration from this thing, the Honda E. Does it look like the Honda E? Yeah? Also, look at this from the front, because it's quite chunky. Inspiration borrowed from maybe the Kia EV9. I've got another thing to show you as well. The Suzuki Ignis, the back end is straight off a Suzuki Ignis. So lots of cars kind of married together in ultimately a quite harmonious way, apart from this. I do not like when they put these charge flaps at the front of the car. Very handy for charging, but it messes with my OCD. Anyway, around the side of the car, again, very, very nice stance to it. Big chunky wheel arches. On these door mirrors, you've got your indicator repeaters just there. A camera just there for helping you see alongside the car. These doors open really nice and wide, so easy to get inside the car. Same for the rear. I mean, if you've got kids, car seat, bung them all in, no problem whatsoever. And then round the back, my favorite angle by far. Check this out, we've got more pixel-inspired lights. These unfortunately are not your indicators, but your indicators are down here. But it does look cool, doesn't it? The back of this thing just looks kind of, I don't know, friendly, but also aggressive in equal measure. Let's talk about boot space. There we go. That pops up. We've got some gas struts, which makes it easy to open. And inside, what you'll find is the weirdest parcel shelf in the world. You've got to kind of pull these tabs to remove it. And it's all a bit strange, but once you get in there, you've actually got a decent amount of space. 280 litres, which you can increase or decrease by sliding these rear benches forward or backward. Also, underfloor storage, and a decent amount at that. Yeah, even though it's a tiny car, it's actually quite practical. One slight downside I've noticed with the boot is that it looks as if it can get dirty very easily. I know it's a prototype, but they've actually got some slight smudging just here on this area. I'm gonna see if I can get some of it out. I've got some spray. It looks as if it might be coming clean, but I think you might have to be careful about how and what you load into the back of your Insta. Let me show you how much space there is in the back of this car. Not a lot, to be honest with you, because it is quite tiny. Psych! Look at that. The leg room in this thing is absolutely amazing. And again, that's down to the fact that the wheelbase is quite big for a small car, and the wheels again have been pushed out to the very front and very back, giving you so much space inside. You've got a flat floor, a ton of headroom, literally that much, and acres of space to just be you in the back of your Inster. The seats recline, so if you want to be sort of far forward, you can be, or if you want to chill all the way back, you can do that as well. You might have also noticed that there are a couple of dots on the back of this seat here, which are the mounting points for accessories like a tray or other things that Hyundai might dream up in the future. These seats, if you take a closer look, also have a zip all the way around them. So if you're worried about your kids making the back of your seats dirty, you can of course remove the seat covers, chuck them in a washing machine and clean them up real nice. But yeah, lots of space in here, apart from in the doors. That is an abysmal amount of room, not big enough for, well, anything really, but you can't really complain. Genuinely, plenty of room in this car. And the same applies if you want to turn the car into a van. The rear seats drop down to increase space from a minimum of 280 litres to 1,059 litres. If you want even more room, then you can drop the passenger seat to accommodate longer items. And if you want to turn your Inster into a bedroom, you can also drop the driver's seat, which might be handy for those of you who get tired on long journeys, like me. As for the front of the cabin, very nice use of space, very cool design. The steering wheel will be familiar to anybody who's ever jumped into a Hyundai, with the 4 LEDs displaying roughly how much battery capacity you've got left. We've also got 2 displays, 10-inch here, 10-inch there, one for your driver information and one for your infotainment. In terms of speed and responsiveness, it's not bad. I wouldn't say it's the best example that I've ever seen, but also it's not dreadful, but pretty decent. These seats are quite cool. They're finished in a houndstooth design. Very easy to get mucky, but again, you can remove them and chuck the covers into a washing machine and clean them up really nicely. This is fascinating. We've got 2 cup holders right here and a mobile phone holder in the center, but that is connected to the driver's seat, meaning that you're gonna get some spillage. So it's good that these seats are actually washable. Going back for a second to how clever Hyundai have been with their use of space, these seats are fascinating. If I move that armrest, what you'll see is that there's no kind of obstacle between your driver's side and your passenger side, meaning that if you park too close to a car over here and you can't get out, you can just slide across the cabin and get out through the passenger side. In terms of how you control everything, there's a big bank of buttons in the center, which I really like. I love having physical buttons. And again, you've got instant fingertip access to things like your heating, ventilation, and climate control, your media, your radio, and everything becomes second nature after a while. No need to fiddle around with a massive touchscreen, so nice job from Hyundai. In terms of connectivity, I've got USB Type A, 12 volt and USB Type C, and interestingly, vehicle to load. There's a 3-pin socket in the car that allows you to power a hairdryer, a washing machine, pretty much whatever you want. And the same goes for the plug on the exterior as well. Very clever car. Let's get driving. Okay, genuine first impressions about the Hyundai Inster. It feels really compact. Feels like a dumb thing to say, but I'm normally used to driving these big hulking electric SUVs, and stepping into one of these is a really nice change of pace. Very, very small. Seems like it's shrunken around you in some way, but I like that. I also like the fact that there's really good visibility all around. So nice big windows to the front, to the rear. Over my blind spot, I can see everything. I've even taken the liberty of dropping my passenger seat, so seeing out this right-hand side is super easy. I'm just gonna take the liberty of checking the turning circle in this car, because that's one thing I'm slightly worried about. Okay, yeah, okay, it's not the best or tightest turning circle. This is a front-wheel drive car based on the original Casper, which was also front-wheel drive. And I think if it was a rear-wheel drive car, then in theory it would have allowed you to have a little bit better articulation on the front wheels. In other words, they will be able to turn wider, which would allow you to have a much tighter turning circle. But it's easy enough to change back and forth between gears, and the steering is nice and light, so maneuvering around town isn't going to be the end of the world. Let's talk about the core specs of the Inster. There are two versions available. One is a 42 kilowatt hour battery and the other one comes with a 49 kilowatt hour battery, and that gives you a range of either 203 or 229 miles. And the different versions come with different levels of power. So the entry level car comes with a 97 horsepower motor, while this car, which is long range, comes with a motor that can deliver 115 PS. Both versions offer 147 Newton meters of torque. What does that mean? Well, it's not very fast, whichever version you go for. Put my foot down. Do you know what? The torque isn't too bad. It sort of gets moving reasonably quickly, but in terms of raw acceleration, it's not going to offer the kind of rampant performance that you expect from a much bigger, more premium, more expensive electric vehicle. In terms of first impressions, I think one of the things that stands out the most for me in this car is the NVH, or the noise, vibration and harshness. It's pretty decent on the whole, but the faster you go, the more you start to detect wind noise. So I'm doing about sort of 50 miles an hour right now, and there's a fairly decent amount of wind noise coming through what I can only imagine to be the windscreen or the gap in the door just here. So driving on the motorway at 70, you're gonna get some noise. It's not gonna feel quite as premium as some of the more expensive EVs. Having said that though, it is a city car, so you could argue the point that you're not gonna spend that much time on the motorway anyway. On the subject of long motorway journeys, I should talk about these seats. They're actually okay for short journeys, but I suspect that if you were to spend a very long time in them, a few hours, then yeah, after a while they might become a little bit uncomfortable. It is a nice, smooth, easy car to drive though. The steering is light, the accelerator pedal is very progressive. The brakes in this thing are pretty good. There's actually a couple of different ways to brake, believe it or not. One is using the brake pedal, a favorite technique of mine. And if you choose to use a brake pedal, then it works as expected. It's nice and easy to modulate. The brakes are strong, feel quite reassuring. But then there's a second technique, which is to use the paddles behind the steering wheel. So if I pull the left-hand paddle, I can increase the level of regen to the point where the car, if I lift off the accelerator, will actually come to a complete stop. Look at that. So you can drive the car with one pedal. You just lift off one pedal and push down again, and you can modulate your forward and braking momentum quite easily. As for handling, what's it like? Well, I was a bit concerned when I got in this car that it would feel like a big topply mess, and that's because it's quite tall and relatively narrow, and normally that combination can lead to a car that kind of tips over, but here we are making some decent progress through the corners, and that's really composed. That comes as a result of having a really low center of gravity, which is given to the car by the batteries being mounted really low down. So actually, if you want to make enthusiastic progress through the bends, yeah, this car's not too bad in that department.
Hyundai hasn't gone for a big battery in the Inster, but it has given it extra tech to make the most of the battery it does have. It has a heat pump, which is a useful bit of kit on an EV. It's a bit like a fridge in reverse, so it heats the car without using as much battery energy to increase range. It also has a battery heater, which keeps the battery in the optimal temperature window, giving you more chance of getting the quoted range.
Let's do some maths now and talk about efficiency. They reckon this car, the long range, will do 229 miles on a single charge. To me, that's a bit optimistic, shall we say. Remember, the battery in the long range is 49 kilowatt hours. However, the usable capacity in that battery is only 46 kilowatt hours. And I'm told that officially, this car will return 4.1 miles per kilowatt hour in terms of its efficiency. If you multiply 4.1 times 46, you get about 190, and that realistically should be your total range. You might be able to eke out a bit more if you're light-footed and if you drive the car slowly around town, which is what it's designed for. to be fair, but realistically, I'd say somewhere south of 200 is probably what you're gonna get.
Right, safety tech. The Inster has loads. Let's reel off a few. It'll keep you from drifting out of your lane accidentally. It will brake automatically to avoid a crash into cars or people. It has smart cruise control and will stop automatically if you're about to reverse into something or someone when parking. Plus it has all the usual reverse parking camera tech.
That tech package is probably one of the best things about this car because let's face it, the Inster is on the cheaper end of the spectrum and it's quite likely to end up being a car driven by the younger generation, teenagers, or maybe the older generation, or just people who are generally less experienced or less confident on the road. And having all that extra safety tech is gonna go quite some way to giving you extra peace of mind. So what's my verdict on the Hyundai Inster? I actually really like it. I think the market is crying out for cars like this. It's got a relatively low price, but it's still got a decent amount of equipment. The tech is quite good. The practicality is fantastic, especially with these amazing seats. And on the whole, even though this is still in prototype form, I think the final versions of this car are gonna be absolutely brilliant to drive. If you're looking for a cheap, affordable, practical, and smart EV, put this on your shopping list.